Former Ambassador David Friedman is in Jerusalem right now as we're recording this, and as Israel is at war with Hamas. And Ambassador, it's a great privilege to be able to talk with you right now. And we pray for your safety and your protection and your family and everybody that's close to you. Could you tell us what is going on from your perspective in Israel here?
Well, I think the country went into shock about 10 days ago with the most barbaric, kind of almost you know, inhuman assault on anyone, certainly the most barbaric assault on the Jewish people since the Holocaust, but not even, limiting it to the Jewish people. No one I know has ever seen anything like this where
Mm,
this rampage of about 2,500 terrorists surprised the state of Israel, entered about 22 different communities, and committed extraordinary acts of just barbarity, decapitating babies, killing families, slaughtering families, forcing children to watch their parents being killed, and vice versa, rape and abuse of women, parading women naked through the streets after being raped. I mean, it's just almost impossible to talk about it because it's so unpleasant. But really something which has never happened to Israel before. It certainly wasn't on the scope of the Holocaust, but it was a day in the Holocaust. It was what a
mm,
day in the Holocaust looked like. And of course, as a result, Israel is fighting back, and this is a war. In the past, with Israel has, I would say, tried to manage its conflict with Hamas. I mean, they're a brutal, repressive terrorist group, but rather than have a total, you know, full conflict, they fought back, but ultimately tried to degrade Hamas and to, kind of push them back into their hole for a few years, which they've done, but they keep coming back stronger. And this
mm.
was just, so despicable, and people are so upset, and so many families are destroyed. And of course, there's 200 people being held hostage, and who knows what kind of abominable conditions in Gaza right now. So Israel's fighting back, and we have to pray that they succeed. Of course, at the same time, another terrorist organization on the north, Hezbollah, which is just a proxy for Iran, as is Hamas, they are engaging in sort of a low intensity battle with Israel right now, but threatening to expand it in a way where if it does fully expand, I mean, Israel will be at war on two fronts,
Mhm.
and Hezbollah is a far more formidable enemy. So there's a lot going on here, and a lot to be concerned about, and a lot to pray for.
Absolutely. And we are praying for Israel and for her protection, her people's protection as well. You know, one of the things that you're best known for is the fact that you're the former ambassador to Israel from the United States under the Trump administration, and the work that you did on the Abraham Accords to help bring peace into this area. Um, are y- are you are you hopeful that we will see peace again with these things, that these agreements that have been made, or have these agreements been have they been just basically torn up? How do the Abraham Accords move forward at this point?
So I think, to understand the Abraham Accords is you really need to understand that the Arab world really can be put into two different categories. They're the moderates, and I would put in that category all the countries that signed the Abraham Accords agreements. And then there are the extremists, and the extremists primarily led by Iran, with satellite terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. All the Abraham Accords countries understand the risk that Israel is going through. They understand the enemy that Israel is facing, because it's
Mhm.
largely the same enemy that they face. So I don't think that any of this is going to tear up the Abraham Accords, because, in fact, I think all the Abraham Accord countries, if not publicly, are certainly privately rooting for Israel to defeat this enemy, because it's everybody's enemy.
Hmm.
Um, while this battle is raging, it will be awfully difficult to expand the Abraham Accords. There have been
Sure.
talk about adding Saudi Arabia to the discussion, but it's just too hard to do that, because you got to understand, people are getting their news from different places, and much of the Arab world gets their news from Al Jazeera. And Al
Hmm.
Jazeera will put Israel in the absolutely worst possible light. They will portray Israel, even though Israel, Israel was surprised by this attack. Israel had no interest in attacking Hamas, and Israel has no territorial aspirations on the Gaza Strip. Nonetheless, as Israel fights back, the framing of this conflict in a news outlet like Al Jazeera will be that this is all Israel's fault from the beginning, from the first day.
Hmm.
This is Israel's fault, and Israel is a commits acts of atrocities, and they will take everything that Hamas has done, and they will try to frame Israel as being the culprit with the same accusations. And this is going through the Arab world. When that's happening, Saudi Arabia is not in a position to overcome that media force and to move closer to Israel. But having said that, we've been through a couple of these fights. In 2021, there was a Hamas attack. Israel responded. Al Jazeera did its thing, and notwithstanding all of that, the Abraham Accords withstood all of
Hmm.
that just fine. So I think we'll be able to hold the line on where we are, but we won't go any further until this is resolved.
Yeah. I just want to ask about what it's like in Jerusalem right now because I've been there before, and there's four quadrants of the old city: uh, the Armenian, the Christian, the Jewish, and the Muslim quarters.
Hmm.
And um, it- everybody's, the Arabs and the Jews, or not Arabs in general, but the Hamas, the Palestinians are at war. How and everybody's living together in that one city.
Yeah.
How are things in Jerusalem right now?
Um, I think Jerusalem is one of the quieter parts of the country right now. People are on edge. Everybody's on edge. I mean, it doesn't take much to start a fire here. To start some kind of a conflagration. But it's. I think people are generally speaking not. I think the violence here is under control so far.
Mm,
Again, everything is can change on a dime. Jerusalem, the city is quiet. The tourists are almost entirely gone. The Early on in the battle, like on last Saturday and Sunday and Monday, a lot of sirens in Jerusalem.
mhm,
Very hard for me, by the way, because I had my children, I had some of my children and grandchildren visiting, and I had to explain, to a 12-year-old granddaughter, as I rushed her into a bomb shelter. She wanted to know why are we doing this, and I had to explain that there are people not far away who want to kill us. They want to kill us because we're Jewish. They've never met us. They've never met a single Jew. No one in the Gaza Strip has ever met a Jew. There are no Jews in the Gaza Strip.
mhm.
So people they haven't met, people they don't know, but nonetheless they want to kill us, and they don't care if one of their rockets hits any family, in the neighborhood that they've met. They have nothing against personally. They just want to kill us. You know, this is a message that's not really appropriate for somebody, at that age. But
Yeah.
that's the reality of living in Israel these times. I mean, how to explain. I had to explain it. I couldn't just rush into a shelter with sirens going off without explaining why. It's a bright little girl, but it's a shame. I mean, I thought that we were past this point in our history,
Mm,
but we're not. And as you see from looking at all the protests along, all these college campuses with one would have thought, reasonably intelligent kids, anti-Semitism is at a level the likes of which we haven't seen in decades.
right. And that's something that baffles me because just recently, on social media, I think it was on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now, um, that you know people were, I believe they were calling Elon Musk anti-Semitic, and like they were just claiming that, and so like that's a bad thing to be anti-Semitic. But as soon as Israel defends itself, then those same people are blatantly anti-Semitic and pro-Palestinian, or not
Yeah.
even pro-Palestinian, pro-terrorist. And so it's the hypocrisy in this world is really ridiculous to be able to see that and just to kind of look at it and see, I can't believe this is what this Orwellian world is looking like right
Yeah.
now.
It's stunning. Look, I went undergrad. I went to Columbia University, and then I went to law school at NYU. And these two places over the last weeks have been so shameful. I mean, professors who have glorified the attack. They've glorified it. They said this was an incredible, awesome, attack by Hamas. Um, That was at Columbia and at NYU, the Student Bar Association put out something, the first day, like before Israel even responded. All of this is Israel's fault. So, imagine the pain on the parents of a, there are people there. They're parents now of children who've died. They're
Hmm.
parents of daughters who have been sexually abused over and over again, by the way. I mean, by these animals, um, and then taken over into Gaza and held in hostage. And what these, for lack of a better word, what these idiot college students and law students are saying is that she had it coming to her because she lives in Israel. It's her fault. You can imagine that. So, and the parents have to be exposed to this. I mean, they're not suffering enough already without seeing the insanity that has become of the world. So, yeah, like I mean, I have to tell you, it's almost Israel with all its problems. I mean, Jerusalem, we're in a war zone here, but it's
Hmm.
almost easier to be here because at least we're living in a place where my neighbors to the right and the left, and and all the people I know who are politically to the right and the left and the center. At least here, everybody agrees that these are barbarians who have to be defeated. I mean, at least we're
Right.
not fighting a war of communications in Israel. So while on the one hand, it's a little bit unnerving to be in this kind of an environment, it's at least gratifying and somewhat. I feel somewhat secure that at least everybody here, understands what's happened and what we have to do in response.
Right. You know, it's just recently in the news that we're recording this on October 17th in the afternoon. And so the recently Israel has basically created a unity government during this wartime. And I find it very interesting that and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'd love your insight on this, but I know like Netanyahu and I believe Benny Gantz, they've basically kind of like dropped their defenses against each other, and they're now everybody's all pulling together for the same effort.
Yeah.
Um, what do you see with that in the country right now, and also like as they're moving forward, do you think they can keep this unity and as they're focused on this?
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, look, I think the unity is really admirable. I think the unity government was essential because Um, I think the world needs to understand that whatever actions Israel takes, those actions reflect the consensus of the entire population, not just one side or the other of the coalition. So that's really important, and I think that I'm glad that Benny Gantz joined the government, and he's one of the three members of the war committee, which and he's eminently qualified to serve in that capacity. So that's good. Now, the country, as you know, had been divided politically for months, for almost a
Hmm.
year. Um, I'm happy to say that they're not anymore. I mean, even the soldiers, who were criticizing the government and saying, we might not want to serve, they're all serving. There hasn't been a single person. As a matter of fact, the government called up 300,000 people, 300,000 reserves. Israel's primarily a reservist army, right? I mean, the vast majority of the soldiers have done their 3 or 4 years in the army, and now they're in the reserves. So they called up 300,000 reserves, and the largest call up in history. And about 350,000 reserves showed up. I mean, people showed up that weren't even called.
Wow.
And normally, in a time of war, all the flights that are leaving the country are full, and the flights coming back are empty.
Hmm.
Here, the flights coming back are full because they're full of Israelis who are on vacation or out of the country. They're all flying back to serve their country. So, this was I refer to it sort of as it was a never again moment. It was the moment, when I think certainly the Israeli Jewish population, and I think it's true of Jews elsewhere without the world, though unfortunately not all of them, but I think where the Israelis said, this is the time when this is the reason the state of Israel exists to defend the Jewish people from those who want to annihilate us.
Hmm.
And look, this is the difference between 2023 and 1941. There was no state of Israel during the days of the Holocaust,
Right.
and that's why 6 million Jews were slaughtered. The Israeli Defense Forces will protect the state of Israel, and they will protect the Jewish people throughout the world at this difficult time. And so The country is united like never before. Unfortunately, we paid a massive price for that unity.
Yeah, that is very sad. And I'm reminded of the historical wars that Israel has had, even just 67 and 73. Israel in I believe it was 73 actually took the Sinai Peninsula and even had the Temple Mount for a moment, but then they gave it back. Um, why do you think that they did that? And why, are we reaping the negative consequences of giving that land back right now?
So let me just reorient you a little bit on the history. So 1967, the Six Day War was when the state of Israel reunified Jerusalem. Now they put a
Right.
flag on the Temple Mount, and Moshe Dayan said, "Take it down." He didn't want to have a religious war with the Muslim world at the time. We can debate whether that was a good idea or a bad idea. I mean, I think that right now uh, we got bigger issues to debate, but certainly Jewish people should have free and unfettered access to pray on the Temple Mount, and I hope we get to that point.
Hmm.
Um, Sinai was an exchange for peace with Egypt, which is not a warm peace, but it's been important to Israel's security. um, thank God we're still holding biblical Israel. I mean, we're still holding
Yes,
Judea and Samaria. You and I talked about that when we put out our movie, which seems like a million years ago, but wasn't.
I know.
I
Yeah.
think it was just like last month. Um, uh, Israel, I think biblical Israel is really Judea and Samaria. That area is in dispute, but I think Israel at this point has no intention of ever relinquishing it, and I hope they don't. Um, Look, every time Israel leaves territory, it creates a vacuum that is
Hmm.
filled by terrorists. It's true in three places. In Sinai, when they left Sinai, ISIS moved in. When they left Gaza in 2005, Hamas moved in. When they left Lebanon in the 1980s, Hezbollah moved in. The experiments that they've tried in good faith to try to bring some peace to this war torn area, the experiments they've tried to try to give up some land that they don't really need, hoping that they'll have a quiet border with their neighbors. It doesn't work. And it doesn't work primarily. Look, it's not politically correct in this day and age to generalize about people, and I'm not going to generalize about the Palestinian people, but I'm going to tell you that a very large majority of them are taught. I'm not telling you that they're inherently bad. When they're born, they're perfectly fine, but they are taught to hate the Jewish people
Hmm.
over and over and over again. And the United States gives money to some of these organizations, like UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, which is kind of the educational arm in Gaza. Now, uh, in fourth grade in Gaza, they'll put on a play where half the kids dress up as terrorists and half the kids dress up as Jews, and the terrorists will kill the Jews, and the parents applaud. So, like, where are we going here? I mean, we're not gonna, these are people that are not constitutionally able to live side by side with Israel. It's heartbreaking,
Yeah.
because they're human beings. But there is this, ongoing drumbeat of, you know, don't hurt innocent civilians. Um, and Israel should not hurt innocent civilians. They should do everything they can not to hurt any civilians. But
Right.
understand that, in these places, you have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that really, really hate the Jewish people, refuse to accept the existence of the state of Israel, and they want to kill us.
Hmm.
And some of them are armed, and some of them are not armed yet. But it's a very dangerous environment, and this is not about, no diplomat's going to come in here and change that reality. It just is the reality.
Yeah. You know, with your position as an ambassador to Israel under Trump, um, just I'd like to just kind of role play a little bit here,
Hmm.
because I'm sure you don't have the you. I'm not sure if you have communication with the current ambassador, but what advice would you give to either the ambassador, or even to Prime Minister Netanyahu? What advice would you give?
Sure. Well, I should just tell you there is no ambassador right now. The last one resigned, and there hasn't been a replacement yet. So, but the hypothetical ambassador whenever he gets here. Look, I mean, look, we had a lot of we had episodes of violence in the 4 years that I was ambassador. Again, nothing like this. I think the first most important thing, first of all, is the messaging. America has to message to Israel's enemies that America will not in any handcuff Israel in its defense of its territory and the defense of its citizens. And it's got to be clear and unequivocal. Now, Biden, listen, Biden, um, I've been a huge critic of his policies, and I think a lot of his policies leading up to this point got us into this mess. I think his appeasement of Iran, in particular, has put us in a very weak place in the world. But the last week or so, he's been strong. He's strongly stood with Israel. He's coming to Israel tomorrow on the 18th for a one-day visit, which is deeply appreciated by the Israeli people. And he's moved, two massive aircraft carriers off the coast of Israel to deter Iran and Hezbollah from entering the war. These are all good things, which I give him credit for. The question is, he's meeting tomorrow as well with Jordan, with Egypt, with the
Mm,
Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority, by the way, which pays stipends to terrorists to kill Jews. The more a lot of these people who raped and slaughtered families will be getting payments from the Palestinian Authority because of their extraordinarily successful, atrocities. So he's meeting with all of them, and between them and the UN, which is reflexively against Israel, they're going to try to push Israel into a premature ceasefire. They're going to point to casualties of war, which every war has, and I think that I hope he resists because this is not a situation where Israel has to just degrade Hamas. If Hamas survives this at all, it will be a huge victory for them. They will come back even stronger.
mm,
And the message to the state of Israel is you're not allowed to defend your citizens, and it's going to happen again. And so this is really a pivotal point in Jewish history. And I hope Biden stands with Israel not just today when it's easy because we're all suffering, but over the next few days, in the next weeks, as Israel begins to fight back. I remind people. I did a show um, recently on BBC yeah, I think it was BBC, and the reporter asked me about how important it was for Israel to stop before there were any civilian casualties. And I said to him, the only reason that you're speaking English today rather than German is because your grandparents had the courage to stand up against Adolf Hitler.
mhm.
And when they did, and they defended their nation against the Nazis, they killed 400,000 German civilians. And I don't see you racking yourself with guilt about killing those civilians. I mean, nobody wants to kill civilians, but everybody needs. Sometimes you have to win a war,
Yeah.
and I think Israel will do everything it can to minimize civilian casualties. But there are going to be some. I mean, it's just not possible in that densely populated area. And of course, you take a picture of a casualty, as heartbreaking as it is, you put it on a over social media, over the web, in a 24/7 news cycle, and all of a sudden the pressure starts on Israel, and then Israel basically is in a position where America says, "I'm sorry, you can't defend yourself anymore." So I've seen that movie before. I'm
Mhm.
hoping we don't see it this time because it's in everybody's interest, the entire world's interest, for Hamas to be eliminated. I mean, I also point out that, as I was alluding to earlier, I mean, the population of Gaza is virulently anti-Semitic. I mean, when they saw pictures, because these terrorists gleefully took pictures of all the abuses they committed, they brought these pictures home and they were rewarded with candies and sweets, and people declared a holiday. So, this is not. This is far more nuanced than your typical civilian casualties. And of course, these many of these civilians embed with Hamas and provide them safe passage and a place to hide and aid and comfort. So it's really complicated. But look, at the bottom line is this: it's a war, and Israel did not ask for this war. Israel did not start this war, but Israel must finish this war for its ability to survive. It's an existential risk to the state of Israel, and I would say even to the Jewish people, given all the uh, all the anti-Semitic activity around the globe right now.
Yeah. Where do you see hope right now as we're wrapping up? Where do you see some hope in this situation?
Look, I think we have I think the entire world is really battling this, and some of the battle is just philosophical, and some of it is actually on the streets, and some of it is in the wars. But the world is now getting extremely divided between the people who are moderates, the people who who believe in the sanctity of human life, people who believe in God, people who believe in freedom and liberty and democracy. That's half the world, and the other half of the world is just, frankly, you know, whether it's Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, Hamas, Hezbollah. Um, the threats are massive from all of them, and the hope is that we prevail. Um, we prevail from our strength, not just our strength militarily, but the strength of our ideas, the strength of our faith, the strength of our wisdom, and we're able to really kind of move this. Right now we're sort of in, I would say equipoise. It's like a tie. And I think that we need to be stronger, and we need to be compassionate, but at the same time we need to be brutally honest about how to lead a meaningful, and legitimate and honest life. And I think more people need to be speaking about that. And frankly, John, I think faith plays an important part, because I think
Mm.
faith has been kind of swept under the rug. I think nobody wants to talk about it. My experience with talking to people right now, they are so thirsty for authentic values, for the truth, for God, for His mercy, and that to me is the real hope. That's the ultimate hope, because I think it may be the only hope, but I think
Yeah,
that's what will hopefully bring us out of this morass.
absolutely. Well, I just wanted to say that Charisma stands with Israel. We stand with you, and we are going to continue to be praying for you, Ambassador, your family, your friends, all those people that are connected with you as well. Thank you for taking some time to share with us about what is going on from your perspective, and uh, uh, we'll stay connected, and we'll be making sure that you're covered in prayer for sure.
John, thank you so much. God bless you. God bless all your listeners and your viewers. And let's hope we talk again on happier times.